Okay, since now we started up, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest webinar, the last webinar of Startup Mornings. Muntaha Makhlooq, Outreach and Marketing Associate of Brinc MENA, your moderator for today's webinar. Let's just give you a brief about Startup Mornings. It's a casual get-together for startups by Startup Magazine. I think, as we can see, we might have possibly new participants to the webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. Let's just give you an introduction about Startup Magazine. Startup Magazine is one of Bahrain's most prominent digital platforms for startups in the region. You can follow Startup Magazine on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay informed about these events and the latest startup news and more. The Startup Workshop 2 is a series of free practical workshops and networking events by Startup Magazine for Bahraini women looking to start their own business or learn new skills and knowledge to take their business to the next level. This project is funded by US State Department through MEPI, as made possible through strategic partnership with Temkin, Zam Bahrain, Manama Shapers, OBN Hale, and Mejra. Let's just give you a simple introduction about the format of what a webinar is, or the current one that we're going to go through. It's a casual setting discussion with the speakers, then questions and answers that last up to 30 and 40 minutes, and then Q&As by our audience. Today, I'm joined by our lovely, empowering panelists of entrepreneurs. We have Sarah Schwab, founder of the Experience Accelerator, and we have Dina, Shabib, founder of Farahii. Sarah, can you just give us a brief about yourself?
Yes, with pleasure. And thank you so much for having me. It's such an important topic that we're going to be discussing today. So yes, Sarah Schwab is my name. I'm founder and CEO of the Experience Accelerator. It's a startup headquartered in Bahrain. We're an international startup. We work with companies all over the world. And our main goal in life is to help leaders display better behavior at work. Why is that important? Well, it sounds obvious, but it actually drives a lot of great business performance. Deliver change better, you have more engaged employees, higher productivity, and so on. And so as a female founder, I think this topic is very relevant, and I believe strongly in developing more female role models across the region and across the world, and so was particularly happy to have a chance to speak today.
Thank you, Sarah. I love your vision, and I'm sure it will come true, and we're more than happy to support to make that possible. Dina, if you can give us a brief about yourself.
Sure. Hi. So good morning, good afternoon, I guess. I'm Dina Shabib. I'm the founder and CEO of Farahii. Farahii is a one-stop shop for all bridal and wedding essentials. The idea is to be a virtual wedding planner, to take the burden off the bride from all the little things and annoying things that she has to do throughout her wedding planning journey by coming and getting this done easier. So that's basically what we stand for.
We're going to make sure to aim all the brides into your direction. Sounds lovely, to be honest. It saves a lot of time, and we know how hectic it can be. Okay, so thank you so much for introducing yourselves. Before we start today's topic, what are your thoughts on generalization in this area? Like, for example, nurturing can be considered a feminine trait, but nurturing leaders, both men and women, have been proven to be effective and empowering. What are your views on traits that are classified as feminine, but can be highly beneficial to startups and entrepreneurs? If Dina, you can start if you would like to discuss this further.
Sure. So, I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, as leaders, within our own organization, female or male, there are traits that you need to have and you need to cultivate. And some people have them and some people have to work on them. And I'm sure Sarah can talk to us a little bit more about that. But overall, I mean, I think as a business owner, even, you know, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you've been in business for 10 years, there are a lot of traits that you need to consistently and continuously build and grow within yourself and within your team so that you can actually grow your organization and reach whatever targets you're trying to aim for.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Dina. And I think, you know, focusing on this sort of business ownership, business leadership thing for a minute, I think this is a both and story, right? You shouldn't be, you know, have only masculine traits or only feminine traits. The best leaders are able to have both and select when and where to sort of deploy those respective traits. I do think it's kind of interesting, you know, the World Economic Forum, top 10 skills for 2025. You know, we got things like creativity, emotional intelligence, social influence, flexibility. You know, these are all traits that are typically considered feminine and yet are considered amongst the top 5 skills that we need to be developing. So it's, for me, it's both and, you know, some of those feminine traits that perhaps haven't come into the limelight previously, we really need to focus, as Dina says, on sort of developing and fostering these in ourselves and our teams.
I totally agree with you, ladies. And what do you think, like, to elaborate more into this question, the presence of females in the workplace, do you believe that it has an impact in representing the feminine traits even more in the workplace?
I'm going to say yes and no to this question. So it's not so much, I think, that it represented them, but I think with more women entering the workforce, this is nothing new. This is a while back, but, you know, more and more, I think everyone had to up their game, so to speak. So whatever traits you already had, I think people might have been a little bit lazy in the past, but with more perceived competition, you need to really be on top of your game. You need to be, you know, pulling out those traits from the back pocket and actually using them and you know, incorporating the different things you've learned into your day to day. And like Sarah said, whether it's a feminine or a masculine trait or whatever it is, depending on the situation you're in, depending on the role, and even the industry and the type of job, you need to be able to have, you know, different skill sets and different traits, and to know when to use what to, you know, to further whatever project you're currently working on. And as entrepreneurs, we're often wearing many hats. So you're switching back and forth between different things all day, really. So I think it's something that's ongoing, and you need to keep practicing, I think, to get good at it, because I mean, being an entrepreneur, nobody starts knowing how to do all those different roles. You're not great at finance and IT and legal and admin and leadership, you know, all at once from day one. So it all takes, you know, you practice it and you learn.
True, as they say, practice makes perfect. Sarah, I think you want to say something about it?
Yeah, that's music to my ears, because that's really one of the things that we focus on is deliberate practice, because these things don't necessarily come easy. But I think there's been a misconception in the past is that you're born that way and therefore you should just be that way. And I think, you know, our thinking has evolved significantly since those times, and that you can actually flex and you can get better at these things, even if they don't come naturally to you. I was just thinking about a call I had last week with the chief technical officer of this company, which is experiencing exploding growth. They've gone from 10 people to 300 in the last 9 months. And we were talking about the importance of culture, and what he's seeing is falling apart a little bit in his company is lack of collaboration, lack of care, particularly in the coronavirus situation, lack of being able to give people recognition, support. Again, things that perhaps are sometimes considered more feminine traits. And I just thought it was an interesting example to show that, you know, this explosive growth that us entrepreneurs are always seeking actually comes with a real need to focus on making sure people are happy and engaged at work. And so that's something that I think is something, even no matter if you've got 1 or 10 people or 300 people in your startup, you need to start thinking about this stuff as early as you possibly can.
I agree with you, ladies. Thank you so much for
Actually,
elaborating.
Muntaha,
Question.
Yeah, there was one other thing that I think might be interesting just to throw into the mix with a little bit of data
sure.
behind it, is Goldman Sachs have been doing long cycle research studies on female leadership in business. They just published their newest report in November, and 600 companies, and they looked at the companies that had the highest percentage of female leaders compared to the lowest percentage, and higher share price, higher performance, higher profit margins for those that had more female leaders at the top than those that didn't. And so I think whether we're talking established companies or startups, it was quite a nice and interesting data point for me to read.
Yeah, it is actually. So the case study is quite interesting, and I'm glad to see that there are more people doing research when it comes to this matter, and we can see actual evidence behind it that can back it up, and we can see the shift and change happening more and more often, even faster than before. Before we have to wait a few years to see the impact. Now we just see it happening immediately. Thank you for answering like the start of the discussion. It's a lovely point of views. What do you think about femininity by its very definition as qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of women? But in 2020, we moved past such generalization. We accept how different and unique women are from one another. You have already answered part of this question, as you have mentioned before. Every person have feminine side and a masculine side. But here, what do you think about the 2020 trend of femininity?
Dina, do you want to go first on that one?
Actually, could you go first, Sarah? I've been going first all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like shifting between who should answer first.
Yeah, I think I'd just go back to kind of where I started on this one, which is, you know, the skills and capabilities deemed most important for the future that we're facing comprise, you know, quite a lot of feminine or perceived. I really don't like the term feminine attributes, to be honest, because I think they're universal attributes that everyone should be good at. But, you know, I think one of the other things that we haven't talked about yet is humility. And in an environment where the future is so unknown, we just need to have our learning mindset on. And in order to have a learning mindset, you kind of need to be humble. You need to be humble enough to admit what you don't know in order that you can sort of be curious and learn it. So for me, irrespective if you're a male, female leader in 2020 going into 2021, there's this idea of being humble, genuinely curious, and admitting what you don't know is an essential sort of mindset that we need to adopt moving forward.
I completely agree with Sarah, but I think also to add to that, I think one of the most important skills that maybe are needed right now as well, which I find maybe a little bit more dominant in females rather than male, is emotional intelligence, and being able to read the other person and read the room and understand the non-spoken, because in a time of uncertainty, and when people are generally a little bit more anxious than they usually are, I would think, um, they tend to hold back. They tend to, kind of wait and see mentality. So if you're able to, to read people, to understand what's going on, um, using the different emotional intelligence characteristics, I think that as a, not just as an organization's leader, but just as, as a team member in any organization, it adds a lot of value, especially now.
I do agree. We're in the very uncertain times at the moment and the situation itself. So the more compassionate and more caring I feel like teammates or even coworkers can be to each other, the more beneficial it can be going onwards and moving on to 2021. Um, so the next question is, um, let's start by sharing a few examples of stereotypes on femininity in the world of entrepreneurship, be it in the type of being it the type of business runner, decision making, fundraising, and perception. It's clear that stereotypes impact society and the way it treats any matter. But when it comes to perceived femininity, in what ways do you think it impacts the opportunities for female entrepreneurs?
Well, I've been dying to share this story with someone because I was so horrified. I think one of the stereotypes I've undergone speaking with an investor. His question to me was, so Sarah, if I invest in your startup, are you just going to spend all your money on handbags? That would be an example. I don't think of a microaggression, but a macroaggression, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that there's some perceived or misperceptions, stereotypes about, the type of businesses that women run. It's quite interesting. There's I've seen this in pictures myself and sort of compared with my male colleagues. There's this thing called promotion questions versus preventative questions. So promotion questions, focus on the upside of your business, the potential, where you're going to be able to go to. And preventative questions focus on the risk, what happens if, the more negative side. And so I can really see when I engage with investors that is a big concern. And I tend to get disproportionately more, I would say, risk aversion questions. And this is, I think, is I'm not alone in this. I think there's been a lot of work done on this in terms of analyzing. So I think that's one big problem that female entrepreneurs face, is that the investors, the potential investors in their business, are starting from a completely different mindset. Whether it's conscious or not, it does play out in reality.
Yeah, it is an actual, I would say, a problem that needs to be addressed. Like, even if it comes naturally without them even knowing that, but they need to understand. It doesn't matter if it's male or female, you're talking to an entrepreneur nonetheless. What do you think, Dina, when it comes to the stereotypes?
I mean, honestly, I might be the wrong person to ask this question, because in my opinion, I mean, a stereotype is someone's opinion. So who cares? Right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, your number one asset is your mindset and your focus. And, if you have a good plan, if you have a good business, at the end of the day, even when investors ask a lot of questions, if they believe in the idea, if they believe in the solidity of your numbers, of your plan, and of how you plan to execute, which are the questions that are asked to all entrepreneurs, male or female. And a lot of questions, like, I mean, not to discount what Sarah said, and I completely see that perspective, but very often people who ask those kind of questions are people that are not that serious anyway. They might or they haven't gotten to that serious point in the conversation yet. They're not really in depth talking about, okay, let's make this happen. Let's talk about your, give me the information that's not in your pitch deck. Let's go into more conversations. Because once you get to that point, it's a business deal at the end of the day, and whoever's going to put their money into your investment is going to do the same kind of due diligence no matter who you are. With, of course, keeping in mind different funds have different quotas, have different requirements, and sometimes they're just following company policies, and sometimes you might see a positive side to a stereotype, that they want to invest in women-led businesses because their portfolio might have a certain quota that said X percentage of our funds needs to go to businesses that are led by women or 50% women owned. So I think it's, I think at the end of the day, running a business is running a business. Raising funds is raising funds. Everybody's going to get some sort of random weird question based on where you're from, based on, what kind of economic cycle we're in, based on gender, based on different things. So, it's these are challenges that we get anytime, I believe.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, Dina, because you alluded to some of the upfront steps in the process, right? In the funding process, and the reality is, MENA actually is leading the world in terms of investments in female, the percentage of venture capital money which is going into female founded businesses, but it's still only 5.1% of the total, capital. If you broaden that to a global thing, it's 2.7% of funds go to female. So something's broken. There's too many, in my honest opinion, there's too many people who duck out at those early stages. If you think about there's two areas I believe that with a more fact-driven approach we could improve. Number one, the sourcing, right? How do you get to the VCs? How do you get to the investors in the first place? Typically through network, right? And we as female founders, I think, need to really apply ourselves to improve our network. And then the second is in the pitch. And to pick up on what you were saying, Dina, the pitch, people are either have a bet with and they get past that and then they get into their proper due diligence, or they pass. And I think the problem is with those two upfront steps, we as female founders are disadvantaged from the get-go. Therefore, the pipe isn't big enough for us to get through. So I guess that's where I think about those upfront steps and what could be done in order to level the playing field a little bit more in that regard.
What do you think, Dina? Do you have anything in regards to what Sarah said? Agree, disagree, or agree to disagree? What do you think?
No, I do agree about what she's saying, and I think in I don't know, in my humble opinions, from what I've seen in the past few years, I think in an effort for this region to give more opportunities to female founders, to female businesses, I think there have been a lot of startups and a lot of ideas that have come out by females, but I think that there's still a way to go in terms of maybe the education behind bringing these startups out there, because I think that sometimes due to, we want to support female entrepreneurs, we want to support female founders. Let's have a competition for females only. Let's have mentors for females only. Let's have accelerators for females only. And sometimes there's not enough quality ideas to fill these opportunities. And because there's not enough quality ideas or quality businesses that are mature enough to fill these opportunities, the bar has gone down on some of these opportunities. So when they are then moved to the phase that Sarah was talking about, where they're now pitching and talking to investors, they're already quite below the standard of all the other, whether it's male or other female-led organizations or startups or ideas. So I think that's where the gap is, but the gap is closing, I think, slowly and slowly, as there's, as more of these programs are coming out, as more people are failing and coming back and learning and trying again. This is all part of the process, and this is what's going to make better entrepreneurs, better female entrepreneurs, and better male entrepreneurs, really. So I think it has to do with the ecosystem a little bit. And as it matures, we'll see better.
I mean, I think you make an excellent point, Dina, about pipeline, right? Which is, given that a lot of investors want to invest in technology startups, unless we really fix the pipeline of STEM, so girls that are in science, technology, engineering, and mathematical, studies from early on in their lives, that pipeline list is simply too small to generate the type of quality tech-driven ideas that the investors are looking for. So for me, I think that's one area that I see in all over the world is being invested in, and I'm pretty sure that investment will bear fruit in the next 5-10 years. But still, I agree, we're a little bit short on numbers. I do think, I was lucky enough with Dina to graduate from Flat 6 Labs cohort 1. There were 40% of the companies were female founded, and that was after a process of a boot camp of, what was it, Dina, 3 or 5 days? I can't remember. It was a fair investment up front. There was a pitch, but it was a pitch that was kind of supplemented by 3 to 5 days of observation of us, working through problems in our natural environment. And I do think there's different ways than the sort of traditional pitch process that might actually also benefit female founders more, disproportionately more than male.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry. For me, it's like we have seen more and more programs lately that are supporting younger generations to make this change possible, and we're going to see it hopefully in the near future, I would say. The next question is, I would say, do you think there are ways women benefit from these stereotypes, or have you ever went into a situation where these stereotypes played in your favor?
I mean, I'm going to say, not just as an entrepreneur, but even, from the beginning of my business career, from the beginning of my employment, being underestimated can really help you, because you have a lot more time to prepare your case. You can, you don't have to always perform at your peak, because, you can save your energy for the things that matter. These are some of the things that I found that could be, in different situations, possibly beneficial. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think? You work with a lot of young women as well, and you coach them.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm not a big fan of this question, because for me, it in some ways implies some negativity around feminine attributes, which I think we've been pretty clear on this call to this point, are just different rather than negative. So for me, have people been interested to work with me because I'm a good listener, because I ask good questions, because I try to have a learning mindset? Yes. Am I taking advantage of that? Well, that's just kind of how I show, that's how I roll. So for me, it's not a question of taking advantage. There are certain situations where that skill set that I have seems to play better than in others, and conversely, has worked against me as well. I think we need to get away from this good, bad, 1-0 binary way of looking at this, and be like, we need inclusion, right? Both sides of the yin and yang are good. and we go forward stronger together rather than, you know, in a divisive or separated way.
And you are correct, to be honest. We need to move away from that mindset and we just focus on the generalization of things can be good and bad, no matter what, if it's being feminine or being masculine. So do you think that the society judges female entrepreneurs on whether to be or not to be feminine when running your business or leading a team?
I think that's a very vague question. I think, I mean, you can't judge someone for being feminine or not feminine just randomly. It depends on the situation, depends on the business, it depends. I mean, for example, at Farahii, I actually don't recruit men right now at this phase, because in the beginning we did, and every time we had someone on our team that was male, it didn't work out. They weren't engaged, they were bored, they weren't interested. Even if they were very skilled in the particular technical skill that was needed, it just didn't work out. So as a rule, I've decided, just to save time, for this phase, until we actually grow to a larger corporation with a large number of employees, we're only going to recruit teams of females, because they enjoy weddings and they enjoy the party planning and they enjoy that space, that industry. So within this industry and within the space that I am currently focused in, there's a lot of feminine interests, I would say, not even energy, but interests. So I think it really completely depends on what you're talking about, on what specific situation, and what's the need, you know? What are we working with right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've experienced in my career something that we call the double bind. So, you know, that's when, if you're too feminine, you're perceived as not aggressive enough, not goal oriented enough, not growth oriented enough, not decisive enough, let's say. And yet, when you start to exhibit those characteristics, and you can quickly be perceived as overly aggressive. You may have heard of this queen bee syndrome, you know, where society has a set of rules that through which they want to, you know, view male and female, and that this can be problematic. You know, I don't want to say bad words on this call, but the bee, you know, Sarah's a real bee, you know, has, you know, come up a number of times because I've done turnaround businesses, you know, I've restructured organizations and so on. And, you know, often I'm judged more harshly for doing that than perhaps, you know, my male counterpart, who might be, oh, he's a real go-getter. Yeah, he really goes for the prize, you know. So it's slight unconscious biases in terms of how we judge others that I think still everyone needs to work on. We all have these biases. No one is unbiased. And so for me, there's this really cool woman called Kristen Pressner, and she's developed this concept of flip it to test it. So the flip it to test it, you know, principle is, would you say the same thing to Dina as you would to Ahmed, let's say, you know, or is it, you know, if I were to have that same conversation, would I have it in the same way? Is a great kind of break on your own judgment, your own bias, to be able to say, okay, am I letting my biases creep into to my decision making or how I show up at work?
And this is actually an amazing practice that we put each other in each other's shoes and see how it's actually viewed as, or how you're being approached as well. And as we have mentioned before, and we have discussed, that this is changing and starting from the younger generations, and even with you ladies, the impact that you're creating right now with discussing these topics and educating people about it are really important to moving on forward with the future of even an entrepreneur and what it's like. Another question that I have in mind is limited access to funding something we can pin on such stereotypes or no?
No.
I like how Dina's like cold no, no. Sarah, what about you?
Yes, I absolutely think it can be linked to stereotypes.
Well, do you have something in mind to talk about, or just like you believe it does have something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers speak for themselves. 5.1% of all venture capital going to female founders. That's, you know, and it's better in MENA than, you know, other places in the world where it's 2.7. So that to me shows there's a systemic problem with funding for female founders. Do we fully understand it? I think we're starting to see evidence that venture capital firms who have a more data-driven approach to their upfront deal sourcing and evaluation end up with more female founders in their portfolios. I think that's really helpful. But yeah, I do believe that there's a systemic problem. But Dina, we're not aligned on this one. Where are you coming from?
I see it as more of a challenge pre-funding for the women. So whether it's the pipeline of female companies is not enough, not up to par. And I think one of the biggest challenges that females face is that they have less confidence than men. A man will walk into the room and tell you exactly what he's going to do, how he's going to deliver, even if he doesn't know 100% what the plan is. Whereas as females, very often we want to know exactly step by step what we're going to do before we promise anything. But that's not how startups work, and that's not how funding works. So if you don't have 100% confidence to back up your idea, even if you don't know every step of the way, then you're not going to bring yourself to the point where you're even having that conversation with the investor. So I think it's a lot of that pre-work. It's before I actually get in front of the investor that is preventing having more females up there.
It's mostly the mindset that you go on into what you want to discuss and what you want to see in the proposal itself. So
Yeah.
I do, yeah. So this is even for me something that sometimes something I struggle with. So your advice, Dina, helps a lot. It like coming even from me. So thank you so much for giving that advice. And I feel like we need to emphasize on this point that be more confident and don't be too scared or be afraid of the results. Just be prepared, be confident of what you want, and just aim for it. And we're going to move on to the last question for today. How do we move forward from this? What can be done? How can women help other women in the process of creating a better, more inclusive economy, both locally and globally?
Well, I think there's a lot of things on this, and I'm sure, Sarah, you have a lot also to talk about on this one. I mean, look, first, like the simplest things, awareness, education, mentorship, supporting each other, really, you know, as simple as that. So these are things that we can go into like very deep conversations about this for a long time. But as simple as just mentoring people within your own organization, you know, or helping them out or giving them tips or, you know, pointing out, or maybe even just, you know, whenever organizations are trying to put together their learning plans for their teams, it's not a one size fits all. It needs to be personalized. It needs to be specific to certain needs, to your track of growth, to your own personality and your own strengths and weaknesses. So I think there's really a lot, and a lot of things are being done, for sure. But I think that we have a long way to go still.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's responsibility to put the ladder down to help others come up to the level that you're at is really key. And I think sometimes or I guess the question I tend to ask myself is, what can I do to give energy to this young female entrepreneur? Because it can be exhausting, right? We're constantly fighting. So what positive energy have you given to a female entrepreneur this week, kind of thing, I think would be something which would be fantastic. Because sometimes more critique, however right, however helpful, is just not, it's just not what you need. To Dina's point around confidence, right, is that there's an element of that, in my view, the level playing field is not there. So giving energy. I think for others, this flip it to test it thing is important. So just making sure that that is part of your every day, and recognizing that privilege exists whether you think you have it or not. So there's this show, I'm not sure if you have it in Bahrain, it's called MasterChef. And MasterChef Professionals in the UK has been going on this week. It's the final. There's 4 people who got to the semi-finals, 3 men and 1 woman. She didn't have a good round, and rightly so, she went out. But if you think about the odds, if there had been 50-50, if there'd been 2 women, 2 men, there would have been a woman in the final. But because it was 3-1, there wasn't. And so for me, there is something, this might not be a popular view, but if it's 49-51, if your female person is 49% good and your male person is 51% good, choose the female, right? Just to level the playing field. I'm not talking about lowering standards. I think what Dina said earlier is interesting, is she wants to hire female, young female people into her organization because they're energized and bringing energy and moving the business forward, and that she'll rebalance that later. But think about the start, there may be, male employees, as she's pointed out, who were more qualified, but she's made a determination that for this stage of her business, actually having this positive discrimination is the right thing to get her business outcomes. And I think too often we say, oh, Dina's just a bit better than, John, or John's a bit better than Dina. And we quibble over tiny percentages, instead of saying, on balance, I'm going to give it to Dina. And I think that there's some slight reframing of how we make decisions, particularly around hiring and opportunities, that could actually start to make the playing field more level moving forward.
What do you think, Dina, about how to address this matter? Do you agree when it comes to it? Do you have any different views?
No, I completely agree on what she's saying, and actually it reminded me of a podcast I heard a few months ago about an actress turned producer, and she's a Latin actress, a very well-known Latin actress who was a producer now, and she was saying how she makes it a point whenever she's hiring leadership positions, that even if they bring her, 5 very qualified male CVs, she will ask, why is there no female CVs? Is it possible that nowhere in the US is there a qualified, whatever this position is, that a female has? So, keep looking, keep searching, because as leaders of an organization, we do have the authority to make these hiring decisions. And it makes a difference. And it might be an easier option sometimes to hire a male candidate just because we get those CVs. And I'm not saying always hire females and don't hire male. Of course, there's got to be a balance. And maybe not every position is going to be okay to keep, looking. But it might take a little bit more effort, and it might take a little bit more time. And I think this is definitely something that is 100% in our control to do, if we're talking about steps to be taken. So definitely how you're hiring in your organization, how you promote in your organization. I mean, one of the things when I was saying how a lot of females they don't tend to ask for pitch opportunities. They also don't tend to ask for more money, or they don't tend to ask for a raise until it's given to them. Whereas the male counterpart will probably just walk in there and be like, I want a raise because I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm valuable, and I'm this and I'm that, and you'll give it to him. So maybe you need to encourage people in your organization or even around you. I mean, especially in Bahrain, the community is small and it's tight, and people know people. So it's not hard to reach out and pay it forward, and help out other, younger or, up and coming entrepreneurs, and teach them what we've learned, right? We've, done things wrong so many times until we got it right. So why not make it easier for the next ones?
That is actually a very good advice from you, Dina, and also Sarah. To be honest, you ladies have opened our eyes to the world, I would say, of being a female entrepreneur and the challenges that comes with it, and the advantages as well, and how can we overcome obstacles that we are faced at the moment, and how we can move forward in the future. I'm just gonna give a few minutes for our audience if they have any questions to address to you ladies, and if not, we're gonna wrap up the webinar.
I do think, just while we're waiting for questions coming in, that it's important to recognize that Bahrain has been recognized as one of the top 10 ecosystems that has the highest percentage of female founder representation. And I just, there's a gazillion people that have contributed to that over the past few years. And I think it's really important that we recognize that as well.
It is indeed something to be celebrated.
It really is.
And hopefully we even achieve more, and we move as a society as a whole into a better future with a better perspective of what, just like we mentioned before, let's flip things up and see and understand each other's and the struggles that we go through as well. I believe we don't have any other questions. I think we're going to wrap the webinar up. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. Thank you, Startup Magazine, for making this possible. And I hope everyone have a lovely week, not only a day. And until next year, since this is the last webinar for this year. So see you next year with Startup Mornings and new workshops. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.